Hello, this is the Growth League podcast. My name is Caleb Clark, and my mission for this show is pretty simple. It's to learn from marketers on how they're playing the great game of marketing leadership, their ideas, experiences, perspective, wins and losses, and the playbook that they've established over time. Listen, there's more than one way to lead a marketing team and a marketing function. So if you're a VP, a CMO, director, or someone aspiring to fill one of these marketing leadership roles in the future, tune in to learn from some of the best in the business.
You know, I love selling experiences because there's an emotional aspect to them, and there's a memory token associated with that. You know, you'll always remember the first time you saw a Cirque du Soleil show. You know, you'll remember who you went with, whether it was your parents, your grandma, your girlfriend, your kid, whatever. You'll always remember that. And I think that's powerful.
And today I have the privilege of chatting to Andy Levey. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at Two Bit Circus. Quite an accomplished marketer and marketing leader. I was telling Andy earlier that just looking at the LinkedIn profile and a lot of the business cases that he's been responsible for and with his team in driving, these are, talking about $9 million in annual revenue, while at the same time achieving 50,000 new customer profiles for Two Bit Circus. His experience before at La Pearl by Dragon, ticket sales growth, $35 million in the first year. Cirque du Soleil was instrumental in masterminding the transformative sort of shared services model that brand can tap into. I could go on and on and on. Andy, I'm not going to. Thank you so much for being on the show. Really looking to learning from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Caleb.
So can you give me and the listeners a bit of a overview summary of your journey as a marketer and as a marketing leader? Ultimately, what brought you to Two Bit Circus today?
Yeah, so my background is in finance and investment banking. Not the normal journey of most marketers. I worked in that industry for a few years, and really didn't enjoy it. It just wasn't my niche. It was good money. You work hard, but like you don't feel anything tangible. Like the client makes money or the market makes money, and you don't get to see it. It's a faceless client at the end of the day. And so I decided to go back to school and get my master's and MBA, and I got my master's at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and started working in the hospitality industry, and really understanding how the hospitality industry works, and then was really like interested in marketing, of how like millions of people come to Las Vegas. What do they do? How do they spend money? Where do they spend money? And I was working for a hospitality group called Pure Management Group, worked my way up into the marketing department there, oversaw marketing and like promotions and driving people into the nightclubs. And this was, early 2000s, so right at the advent of MySpace and Facebook being, channels that you could actually use to advertise. We worked a lot with MySpace, and everyone had to like learn how to code HTML and customize their MySpace profiles to promote the clubs. Worked in there for a bit, got old, for the nightclub industry, and had the opportunity to go work for Cirque du Soleil, overseeing their social media team, then overseeing the digital marketing team in Vegas with the resident shows, and then moving to Montreal and overseeing marketing for the global shows, developing a shared service agency inside the company that supported both the resident shows and the marketing shows, as well as advising other partners. And that was a blast. I mean, I got to work with like really cool brands, including Cirque, the Beatles estate, the Elvis estate, James Cameron and his group, because we did an Avatar show, Michael Jackson estate. So all of these like just gigantic either artists or estates that you're just like, whoa, this is incredible. And you get to meet all these cool people, and it was a blast. Then I got recruited to move to Dubai and develop what I call kind of a reverse startup. One of the former producers and creators of shows, Franco Dragon, he created O and Mystere and La Rev in Las Vegas. He was creating a show called La Pearl in Dubai, and obviously, like, you know what the end product will be from, working in this industry, and obviously as a viewer, you know what a circus style show spectacular will look like. But this was the opportunity to really build the infrastructure from the ground up, develop a show in a market where really there wasn't a permanent show. And shows had come toured before, but so that was just an amazing opportunity. Like I said, it was truly a startup, and a lot of fun and a great team. And then was there for 3 years, and then had the opportunity to move back to the States, and connected with some people who connected me with the team over at Two Bit Circus, Brent Bushnell, Eric Gradman, Kim Schaefer, and we just hit it off. And I've been there since. And it's a great company, visionary group, great people, and it's just been a ton of fun.
That's awesome. I spent a little bit of time looking at some of the content for Two Bit Circus, and I landed on a video that was sort of this super engaging sort of fly through of the whole venue, showing the different experiences at the bar, in the restaurant, in the arcade games, and the VR. I got to imagine a big part of your time and your team's time is spent on matching or at least communicating customer experience and being
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how your effort is geared towards building a promise and then fulfilling a promise that they're gonna experience at Two Bit Circus, which looks amazing.
Well, I mean, I think that's a really good way of framing it, because a lot of times, you look at the comp set, whether it's performing arts or location-based entertainment, and they just kind of like slap the standard thing together, and it's like, what touring show is this, or is this X bar, X arcade? Like, they all look the same. And so for me, I try to put myself, I'm older now, so I'm not necessarily in the right demo for these things, so I try to put myself in the demo of who we're trying to talk to and who we're trying to attract.
Mm.
And a lot of what I believe in, and we did a bit of this at Cirque, I did a bit of this in Dubai, and we've done a ton of it at Two Bit, is have the creators who are engaging, these audiences create for your brand. And so by giving them the platform of your brand to both promote them and add to their sizzle reels for possible jobs, um, really giving them the platform to develop innovative and unique content that will help your brand stand out. And so, we worked with a fan of the brand who we became friends with, and her name's Cash Bunny, and she just does such great work. She has a whole crew. She's a great director, and really can storyboard. She's got a drone pilot. And so, I recommend to anyone, watching this or listening, please go check her out. She does just amazing, unique, out of the box stuff, and she works for huge brands now. So it's always trying to figure out, like, who are those diamonds in the rough, or who are those next up and coming creators or producers that you can work with to, not necessarily, spend a ton of money, on production, or know that, like, you got to get nimble and figure out, is it a cash deal? Is it a cash barter deal? Is it, trading and making sure they get credited? Or is it all of the above? So it's really understanding that. And then, the biggest challenge, like, as a marketer, for sure, like, I can make amazing stuff. I can make stuff look great. Like, I know how to do it. I know the right people, but, like, does the experience actually match up? And that's where,
Exactly.
it gets handed off to the ops team. So it's really like, it's a cyclical thing, and understanding, I really recommend that to marketers. And I think that's a challenge a lot, especially in the entertainment industry. A lot of marketers don't understand, is like, okay, cool, we've got this budget, we're going to create this commercial. Well, what does the local team think of it? How do they react to it? Are you featuring things that are no longer relevant there? Or, like, are you capturing an angle that someone's never going to be able to buy a ticket for an experience? What is the feedback? And so having feedback loops with them, sending out, your customer surveys, your NPS surveys, listening to key feedback, and really working in tandem with them to make sure that the hype, the hype can match the experience.
Right. Well, and when you work for a brand that has such a such a wow factor attached to it, and there's enthusiasm that bubbles organically from those outside the four walls of your marketing team, it becomes a challenge, or really a fun opportunity to, what you're saying, identify it, leverage it, and harness it within the overall direction of your marketing strategy. And I think that tapping into that, not necessarily user generated content, but external enthusiasts
Yeah,
facilitate.
yeah. I mean, it's a tight line. Like there, we use a lot of UGC, but that serves for a different purpose.
Right.
But making sure that like there's so many good creators out there right now, and especially in the TikTok world, the Instagram world, even the YouTube world as well, and just reaching out to them. Like the worst they're going to tell you is no.
Yeah, exactly.
And just saying like, hey, we have this place, here's a video of it. Do you want to come and film? We'd love
Yeah.
to collaborate. Let's figure out a way to work together. Like I said, most of the time they'll say yeah, or we don't live here, or no, we're not interested because we're making $150,000 a month
Right.
off of ads from YouTube.
Exactly. Yeah. So, switching gears a little bit, 4.5 years ago, when you got to Two Bit Circus, what was the sort of state of the marketing function or marketing system there, and more, or describe what was really important to you in terms of establishing infrastructure or direction within the first 6 months? Can you remember what that first 6 months looked like, and how you leveraged experiences from Cirque and otherwise, to kind of hit the ground running in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, I generally have a standardized approach when I come into companies, and I do a bit of a diagnostic. First thing I do is I meet with all the stakeholders, regardless of marketing department, sales department, ops department, exec level, and I ask them the same set of questions, and then I synthesize those questions and understand like, okay, everyone's saying the same thing, which sadly never happens,
Yeah.
or like, okay. I see, like, because I think that's the thing too, is, it's breaking down barriers. There's always barriers between sales and marketing.
Mhm.
People view marketing as kind of not necessarily, they view it as a product and a function, not necessarily as a support. So, ops, how can we support you? What is a message that we need to get out? Sales, like you need to sell. How can we convey that message? Brand, how can we convey the brand message? What do the founders want to convey? So understanding those questions, understanding really what the goals were, and how, the revenue goals, what the targets were, and how we could um, capture that and achieve that relatively quickly, and what were the current tools that we were using. And so it was the ability to figure out like, okay, we need to put, I always say butts and seats. It doesn't work in arcades. Sometimes we say heads and sets, but like you need to put people in and drive people in. So how are we going to do that, and what are we doing? And really revamping both the content strategy, the paid media strategy, and iterating from it, and building cases internally to say, okay, listen, I know you've given me X budget, but if we can get ROI of Y, or we
Yeah.
can reach this revenue in X amount of weeks, then we need to increase, our budget. And so having those conversations, with our CEO and COO, and figuring out how we could drive it forward. So, it was, typical startup, everyone's moving a million miles,
Yeah.
per minute, best of intentions, and just figuring out like, okay, how do we harness this? How do we make sure that we have systems in place, and how do we drive the business forward?
Right. Right now, for you and your team, if everything else fell through the cracks, but one thing was achieved really well, 10 out of 10, how would you describe the Northstar mandate for you and your team? How is that defined as it relates to a business case, or a North Star, call it the ultimate thing that matters for your
I mean, it's
function?
revenue at the end of the day.
And so
What
with that, there requires such a, as you illustrated, such a tight integration and collaboration between sales functions. So tell me about how marketing integrates with sales today to be able to actually fulfill that mandate.
Well, I mean, sales, both teams can't exist in a vacuum, right? And both strategies can't exist in a vacuum. Um, they have to feed into each other. And a lot of times, the typical sales mentality is like, well, I have this relationship, or I'm gonna reach out to this person. Okay, well, what material are you going to give this person? Like, how are you going to convince this person to uh, buy out the park or throw a party at the park? What are you showing them? What are you explaining? So I think, you know, understanding that we're not enemies, we're not competing, we're a team, and that our ad spend will actually help drive more leads your way. And demonstrating that, like, hey, we're going to carve off a portion of the marketing budget to be a dedicated sales budget, so that when you go to the website, there's going to be lead gen forms that will, funnel in leads for you, and then you'll have automatic leads in addition to the outbound that you're doing. And so we didn't have that before. We implemented a new website, put forms on there, and scheduled a lot of or built a lot of automations into that as well. And obviously, when you're spending a significant budget driving people to the website, yes, they're going to come from a leisure perspective, but people are going to also come from groups.
Right.
And so that was huge for us to really harness that and capture that and show that, like, hey, like, we will give you a pipeline of leads every single day, until you tell us to stop. But you're not, because it's generating revenue, and it's a high profit business for us.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about the structure of your immediate marketing function team, and what does that look like?
So a little small at the moment. I've got myself, and I've got my marketing coordinator, and she's been doing a great job at outreach, really working with the content creators and the influencers, especially in the LA region and Dallas as well. And then we've got a supporting agency that works with us for media strategy and media placement.
Cool. Throughout your time as a marketer and a marketing leader, and now working with your immediate team member, the agency, and other departments, what have you learned over time and you would claim today as being one or two of your superpowers as a marketing leader? Things that others would say about you, like, this is his superpower, but what do you feel most confident coming to the battle with, if it was your weapon, if you will?
I don't know what trying to think of like a clever pun or superhero thing, but like I would be like the glue man, like or dot man. Like I connect the dots really well, and I'm able, I view myself like, sports analogy, like I'm a field general, whether it's football or hockey. I'm able
Right.
to understand what the real playing field looks like, and understand that, like, okay, if we make this decision, how does this affect
Right.
sales? How does this affect ops? How does this affect IT? How does this affect the person working the front desk, or a consumer walking in who's expecting something? And so
Yeah.
really being able to take a step back and have that overview of what we're doing, because what I found is a lot of times people, they put their heads down and they just keep moving, and it's like, well, you affected this team or you affected that team, and you know those those things hurt over time, and those are relationships that you've got to maintain and develop, because you need everybody to work as a team to drive these things forward.
Right. And no doubt that has been established over time based on your experiences and seeing the fallout potentially of.
Oh yeah, I've stepped in it a million times. So, I've scheduled things when people weren't aware. I've done stuff when, like, you got to go through it, right? You got to step in it and realize you messed up. But I think really learning that really cemented, it's Cirque, and both Cirque and the Pearl, just because, like, it's human performance, right? And so everyone has to know everything, because people's lives are on the line. And not saying that, like, hey, I did something marketing wise and there was a life at stake because marketing
Sure.
did a promotion, but we did a lot of events. We had a lot of different types of promotions and shoots. In Dubai, we worked really closely with Dubai tourism, and we brought in Shah Rukh Khan, who's like a big Bollywood star, like the Tom Cruise of Bollywood, and we did a film shoot with him, and the logistics on that were super complicated just in terms of logistics and timing. We had Sheikh Mohammed, the ruler of Dubai, and the UAE come in, and so it was just understanding like every single action affects someone, and how it works. And like in situations like that, you don't want to be the one left holding the bag, right? You want to make sure that everything works together well and everyone's communicating. And sometimes like, yeah, it's annoying, but you got to over communicate and like double check and triple check with people.
Totally. Besides getting paid for your job, what defines what do you care about there? What represents the fire for you that it brings
It's
you
a
a lot
good
of joy?
question. That's a good question. I mean, I've had this conversation a
I'm
lot
assuming you get
recently.
paid for your job first. So, but let's.
Some days,
Okay.
um, I think about it a lot because like I've been talking to a lot of people, and they talk about like, oh well, you don't work in product marketing, or you don't do this type of thing. And it's just like, well, I do. Like I am product marketing, and like I'm marketing experiences. I'm selling experiences, and experiences are the product. And I think the fact that whether it's Two Bit, whether it's the Pearl, whether it's Cirque, whether it's a nightclub, I love selling experiences because there's an emotional aspect to them, and there's a memory token associated with that. You'll always remember the first time you saw a Cirque du Soleil show. You'll remember who you went with, whether it was your parents, your grandma, your girlfriend, your kid, whatever. You'll always remember that. And I think that's powerful. Or if you came to Two Bit, oh, I came there with my office buddies, or I came there for my friend's birthday party. We had a blast. Like those things are powerful, and they're amazing. And like I don't think there's any other job in the world where you can say that. Like you can't sell like a Kleenex and be like, hey, how did that Kleenex make you
Yeah,
feel? Or when was the last time you used Kleenex? Like, well, I had a cold last week, so of course, like,
and I don't want to
um,
remember that.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's what drives me, um, and I like bucking trends. I like being a disruptor, or like I like to call myself an entrepreneur, like
Mm,
pushing within companies that need the change, or need a little bit of shakeup, and figuring out how to do that from within. And sometimes you'll get monumental pushback, and sometimes you're going to get pushback and you can keep moving forward. And you just need a company that believes in you, and trusts you, and trusts the process. And then obviously like you as the marketer actually have to show those results. But yeah.
yeah. No, that's awesome. Again, I just keep thinking about that fly through video, and if I'll clip it in the show notes, but it's incredible. It's incredible. I mean, just right away, immediately, you're like, I need to be here. Um, can we talk? And this could take on a whole other episode. So we'll just kind of from the surface level. Can you describe to us maybe what are the top three buckets of customer segments that you approach, and how are they approached differently from one another?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say for Two Bit, our customers, we always say this, but they wear multiple hats, right? And so that's how we bucket our customers. So you're a customer, that's, and it's gotten younger, but our target's been pretty much post graduation, pre-kids. So you're young professional, possibly single, possibly dating, maybe not married, or maybe married. It's your first job, and so you're going to go out there on a couple's night, date night, hang out with the girls, the boys, whomever, right? So that's one of our segments. So understanding what they do, what is the content they consume, and then also knowing that, like, okay, you're not just going out socially, but you're also working, especially in LA, you're working in an entertainment company or an agency, or in Dallas, you're working for a corporate agent, a corporate company, nearby. So knowing that, okay, you're going to come there as a guest in one form or another, knowing, you can come there as a leisure guest, and then you're going to have so much fun that you're going to want to book a corporate happy hour with
Right.
that. So making sure that, people are aware, like, not just can you come and play, but you can also book, an event. Um, and then the third is, just, coming, for fun, just knowing that, like, okay, it's a kid's birthday party, or we went there as a guest and now we discovered it. So I mean, that's how we we handle it Two Bit specifically. In general, it's more of just understanding like, what are your KPIs? What are your goals? If you're starting from scratch, obviously you have to identify what that target looks like and iterate from it, right? Because you're not always going to be 100%. If you're an existing business, understanding what works and what doesn't work, and being willing to test and saying, hey, I know we need X amount of budget to run this campaign, but we need to carve off Y budget just to show
Right.
if we can really develop and grow this new audience.
That makes sense. There's something you said there that I want to highlight, which I've seen too often. Marketers get a little bit too scientific about bucketing and categorizing, and I think that there's opportunity missed. And the biggest opportunity I see missed is what you just mentioned, which is one human can represent multiple segments. And so
Yes.
you're marketing to the human, and you're marketing to them in their stages of life. And even though it's one guy named Tom, if he's looking at the world through the lens of want to go out with the boys on a Friday, but then he's looking at the world through the lens of I want to bring something compelling to my sales department for a team
Right.
getaway, same human. But I think too many times with overthinking segmentation, Tom may not find himself in one of those boxes. And so
Yeah, he may find himself in all three of those boxes, or he
right.
may not be in any of those boxes. And that's what drives me nuts when I see,
Yeah.
companies or brands present like this is the persona. They have 3.5 kids and they
Yeah.
drive this type of car and they do this thing.
Yeah.
It's like one person, dude.
Says who? Yeah,
Like you're
exactly.
advertising for one person.
So as fun as the brand looks, and as exciting as the craft is, and the way you've kind of built your playbook, you're a human at the end of the day. What comes to mind when I say, what is the thing that causes you and your team right now the most pain or frustration or worry, or I hate the term keeping you up at night, but what's the biggest
No,
challenge?
I love that term. I mean, that's something I always ask people too, is like, what keeps you up at night? For us, it's just, it's what's going to happen next. Quite frankly, we we were doing really well, beating, month over month, year over year, and then the pandemic hit, and we were closed for 14 months. We reopened in spring of 2021 with a lot of exceptions, and rebuilt the business. And now you look in LA, and there's the writer's strike, there's the actor's strike, and there's economic downturn as well. People aren't spending as much discretionarily as they used to, just because the
Mhm.
cost of life has gone up
Yeah.
substantially. I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. I really don't. And so that's a huge factor. And so it's just like, how do we make sure that we provide value for our guests? How do we make sure that we're still relevant to people, and how do we do that when we're balancing all these challenges?
So leaning on your superpower of kind of taking that omniscient 10,000 foot sort of dot connecting approach, you can understand that tactically we need to execute XYZ, but we can't ignore macroeconomic realities and
Right.
societal realities. And then I think that's great. And it doesn't necessarily, that superpower doesn't necessarily have to come through tenure and experience, but I think that if you have it's critical. It makes all the difference in the world to a holistic marketing experience. You mentioned you have a agency that you work with. One of the topics that comes up a lot is um, how do you create the best possible relationship between the integration of internal team and external partner? What's been your playbook on making that the most fulfilling and rewarding positive experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say first and foremost, it's never easy, right? Because like there's always a discrepancy, or a barrier. But you want to make the agency feel like they're part of the company. You want them to feel like they're a partner. You want them to feel like they have, skin in the game, and understand that these are the results. These are where the efforts are leading. And from, the reporting point of view, maybe from Google or from MetaSuite or from TikTok or other things, OTT, like, okay, the numbers look great, but here's what it's translating into bottom line, and making sure that they understand that. Because like, you can give the greatest reports in the world to say like our click-through rate is, surpassed 6% or CPC is X, whatever it is. But if you're not driving the bottom line of the business, then, the agency needs to know that, right? It's only fair. So you can't, because that's one of the factors I learned early on when I was working in Vegas is you would have, especially at Cirque, you would have relationship partners. So you'd have the hotel partners because they're a part of the investment of the shows. And you'd sit in these meetings and they'd be like, okay, this campaign performed well. Okay, well, what does well mean?
Yeah.
Well, we're seeing good CPC or seeing good CTR. And it's like, okay, but here's what the ticket sales are.
Yeah.
Here's what it looks like. So how do we drive this? Or, okay, we want to increase website visitation. So how do we get top of mind? How do
Right.
we get top of funnel? Like, what are those activities? So
Right.
it's a challenge, right? And it's being transparent and like I said, making sure that there's that inclusion and understanding of what the business's goal is, just to make sure that it's fair to the agency. Because if not, you're just going to burn and churn through as many agencies as you can.
Totally. So do you think that those problems happen mostly if or when that that so what business case factor isn't clearly communicated at the beginning? It's just kind of like, oh,
Yeah. Well, and those change over time too.
right,
Like the course of a business changes. Like we talked about in the last question, macroeconomic factors come into play. But I
right,
think it's always just being the squeaky wheel to be like, okay, guys, this is our goal. Here's where we stand, and we share our results with our agency so they know, like, okay, like these numbers are looking good, but something's wrong because it's not translating, or
right,
okay, we don't know what happened here, but like we haven't put any effort into this thing and now it's taking off. We did some digging and it turns out it was from a TikTok that went viral or things
right.
like that. So it's just always communicating and not necessarily waiting for, whether it's a biweekly or monthly status at the
Yeah,
end of the
yeah,
month. Cause like that's also passive, right? Like that's in the
totally.
past. You can't affect anything based on that. So just, making sure that you're as engaged as possible. Cause like, you're responsible for the agency too. So if they don't perform, it's a reflection upon yourself.
Totally. No, that makes sense. Um, for you personally, what's important to you as it relates to team and people management and empowerment and culture building, if you will? What's become important to you and represents your approach, I guess?
I think it's a good question. You got good questions, dude. Transparency and feedback. I think feedback has a negative connotation, and
Right.
people are afraid and they want to tiptoe around it. But like, tell me if I screwed up, or tell me if you disagree. If we're a part of the same team and we're working together, it's really important to make sure that we've got everything out on the table and we're aligned. And if we disagree on something, I want to hear your side of it. Why do you disagree? Why do you think, we should be doing this when we should be doing that? So I think having those lines of communication is really important. Don't sugarcoat things.
Yeah.
Don't beat around the bush. And that's the thing. Like culturally as well, you learn like different cultures have different ways, and the more direct you can be, just because you're being direct doesn't mean you're being mean. It just means like this is what needs to get done, this is when it needs to get done, and this is what we expect.
And some people just love that because they don't have to guess, they don't have to, and I think that that's more and more people love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, if not, you're asking a ton of questions and then you're really annoying because you're asking a ton of questions. But it's like, okay, well, what's the vision? What's the goal? Right?
Yeah. Well, to your bit about transparency too, I think it's just unbelievable what happens when people feel, I guess, safe is the word, right? When they know where they are and they feel safe to have those conversations, you just get the full color of people, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, for us, like at the end of the day, like we're marketing circuses and arcades. This
Yeah,
isn't, we're not saving lives here. So like if there's something that you're holding back, like, I don't know what you're saving it for. So
yeah. No, totally. Um, I had a question about what happens, or at least what is your approach if, and this may not be the case, but it may be in companies in the past, or maybe it's a word of encouragement to somebody else, but what happens when you're leading a marketing function and you fundamentally disagree with the direction of the business? How do you do your job when you feel that you're just metastasizing something that is broken?
It's tough. I mean, it is a tough situation. You just
This
got to put
came
your
up in
best
a
foot.
poll. So just for context, I asked polls for, what are some of the things we want to talk about? And this has come up a lot. It's like, how do I keep doing my job with energy and passion and care when I don't believe in the soundness of what it is we're doing?
Yeah, it's super tough, right? Because it's your job. You spend more time at your job than you do with your family. You spend more time thinking about your job than you do about the weekend, whatever it may be, right? So it's all consuming, right? Um, so I think it's challenging. I think it's stressful, and I think you know you have to think about yourself as a professional,
Mm,
and what does it mean for you, and how does it reflect upon you? And I think bad habits start that way. If you start to give up or start
right.
to like sometimes you can't change those things, and you're in a stuck situation and it sucks. But give it your all no matter what, and then figure out what your next move is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's the thing. Like people will that performance will reflect upon you no matter what happens.
Yeah, for sure.
And yes, there's always a narrative, right? But uh, like what are the lessons that you can take from it, rather than being like, oh, this place sucks, like I can't do this. And it's like, okay, well, grass isn't always greener,
Yeah.
and I think that's the other thing too, is like there are always challenging situations, and no company is perfect. Every company has its own headaches and challenges, whether it's product focus, corporate focus, culture focus, whatever. But it's just like, just know that you're there for a reason. You have a skill set for a reason. You're hired for a reason, and you'll get another job elsewhere for a reason
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. Andy, like outside of doing your work, chipping away at the business case, outside of work, like what fills your cup?
My kids. I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they're awesome kids. Two girls. They're just amazing kids. My youngest is in gymnastics and has self taught herself, at home how to, do back bends and handstands, and it's amazing to watch her. And then my eldest plays hockey and is on a all girls team here in Arizona, and
Wow.
it's just fun. It's just fun to watch her grow and watch these kids grow, and understand how their brains work, and like, take that step back and realize that like this is the future, and like the stuff that they're experiencing now is stuff that we probably experienced like 10 years ago, Instagram, or the use of
Can you
computers, or
imagine?
how like my my kids don't have iPhones, like we're not allowing them to have
Yeah.
that. But like this summer, my daughter's like, "Oh, I'm talking to my friend from school." And I was like, "How?" And she's like, "Oh, well, we went on Google Docs and we just like chat with each other on Google Docs." And it's just like,
They'll
that's
find a way.
both awful and like awesome for you figuring that out. Um,
It's awesome.
so, so seeing stuff like that, it makes me just ponder and wonder, like what is technology, what does marketing look like for them 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Like, it's crazy.
Well, I just
But yeah,
hope
that's what fills my void. Yeah.
that's awesome. I have a 4-year-old daughter and a 3-month-old daughter, so
Oh, wow. Congrats.
I'll hit you up in 10 years when I'm trying to figure out a way to say they can't have iPhones or whatever it is. Then, like, they can't
Yeah, it'll
you can't
probably be like
teleport, guys. I'm sorry. Like,
yeah, you can't have the TV contact lens.
yeah. Well, I could talk to you for another 3 hours, but thanks for bringing us into your world a little bit, how you approach this game of marketing leadership, and I really appreciate your time and your insight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Awesome, everybody. Andy Levey, sorry, Andy Levey,
All
Two
good.
Bit Circus, and a lot of us Canadians haven't experienced the Two Bit brand, so what would you kind of give as a 30-second commercial and what you might expect?
Yeah, so imagine, an arcade like no other. 50% of the games we make in-house. We have our own version of escape rooms we call story rooms. We can perform operation on a puppet. You can, work in a candy factory. We've got our high-tech version of, your traditional carnival / midway. We've got some cool VR games like a VR roller coaster, VR Ghostbusters, just a lot of stuff that you might have seen before, but you probably haven't. And then a bunch of arcade games that are classic arcade games and unique ones that only exist at 2-bit.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to get down there and we'll spend some time there.
Sounds good, man.
Thanks so much, Andy. I appreciate it.
All right, no problem. Thanks.